Welcome to the Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery, where every death had a life and every life had a story. My name is Jenny Johnson.
Hello, and I'm Diane Hartshorn.
And we are so glad to welcome you all back this week with another couple of preservationists. We've developed this little preservation series in the past couple of weeks without even realizing it. It just worked out that the guests that we've scheduled recently, that happens to be their passion. And the timing was right. So we're hoping everybody's enjoying learning a bit more about the preservation and conservation work that goes into maintaining all of these beautiful, old, wonderful, fabulous cemeteries that we love so much. And this week's guest, Dianne, is going to actually introduce because she knows them very, very well.
So I'm very excited to welcome to the podcast. Well, their faces are there. I was going to cover this picture.
That's great too, because it's a great picture of them.
Yes, Jennie and David Carr. So I must say I have never met a more enthusiastic couple who just brings so much passion and love to cemetery conservation. So very excited to have David and Jenny Carr join us this evening.
Yay. So welcome, guys. And the thing is, you worked with them for so long at Evergreen, and now you have relocated. And you guys are in Massachusetts now, where you've started your own business with the conservation. So tell us a little bit about that and welcome everybody.
Yeah,
thank you for having us.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Well, so we sponsored an Air Force cadet way back in early 2000s, and we were active duty Air Force at the time, and they needed a home away from home, so we sponsored this cadet. Well, he happened to be from Massachusetts, and so we became fast friends with the family, and started coming out like every year to New England. And I'm from upstate New York, as you know, that's where I grew up, and so wasn't too far from home. And we came out here for the cemeteries, and we spent all kinds of time with billion graves and oohing and on and here and there. And how many more can we squeeze in? And oh, come look at this. And so back in 2023. We thought we were going to be moving for a job relocation. Turned out we were going to be moving, but we just didn't know that it would be somewhere else. Company I was with was reducing, and so they rolled me off of the contract, and I applied. We kept talking about, wouldn't it be fun? Wouldn't it be cool to live in New England with all the cemeteries, like all the history, like all that stuff?
Yep.
And lo and behold, I looked at her and I was like, well, there's a job opening in Massachusetts. I don't know anybody in this company, but let's just see. And so I sent off the resume. A couple days later, they're like, you want an interview? Sure. 30 minutes after the interview was over, the recruiter calls. He's like, so you want the job? And I looked at her and I was like, you want to move to New England? And what did you say?
Yeah, we're going.
Yeah. It was like, why not? We're empty nesters. We got no reason not to go. So on a wing and a prayer, we lined it all up, and in 30 days, they moved from Colorado to Massachusetts, and here we are.
So quick.
I love it. And you know what? I would have done the same exact thing. Some of my absolute favorite cemeteries are right there in Massachusetts. So
Yes.
Yep.
I've been trying for years to convince my husband that at some point, that's where we need to be. So.
Maybe we'll inspire him.
Exactly. He supports my cemetery habit, as we call it, but he's not as into it as I am. So, and he's really worried there's not enough pinball in Massachusetts, but we'll see.
Oh, there's gotta be. We'll find some for you.
I know there's pinball out that way. So we'll do it. So you moved out there, and of course you get to see some of the country's oldest cemeteries in New England, because that's where all of our founding fathers settled initially and everything. So you get to really spend time there. And of course, you said you moved out there for another job, but you've also started Gravestone Guardians, which is your actual preservation and conservation business for the cemeteries. So tell us a little bit about the cemetery you started with out there and what led to putting all of that together.
Wow. How do we start that?
Well, I could keep talking.
You could keep talking.
Yeah.
Let me just interject really fast.
Yes.
Or he goes on again. Because it really goes to his hometown in Saugerties, New York. So we'll let him talk that. I find it funny when people asked us what brought us out to Massachusetts. And I'll say, well, his job. And they're like, you left Colorado. Why would you leave Colorado? People leave the east to go west and go to Colorado. And I said,
True.
yeah, we came here for your cemeteries. And the look we get is hysterical because, yes, his job brought us out here, but we really came for the historic cemeteries.
Mhm.
So every time we came to visit, we get back on the plane to go back home to Colorado, and we would just, when can we come back? When can we come back? So we're like pinching ourselves. We keep saying, what are we doing out here? What are we doing? We're doing this. We talked about it for so long. So we are living a dream, which has been really, really fun.
Which I love.
But really, so we were happy with building graves and just visiting cemeteries and doing a little bit of headstone cleaning, but nothing intensive, right? And but then rewind to early 2023. It was early February, and a friend of mine from high school, his dad and I were connected on Facebook, and he posted on one of these cemetery pages about, oh, I'm so glad I found this page, and we have this location here in Saugerties, New York, and I was like, I was intrigued, and so I reached out and I introduced myself, and he explained that they're the Finger Ground, formerly known as the Old Plattekill Cemetery, in Saugerties, New York, was in serious need of help. And there were Revolutionary War and War of 1812 veterans buried there. And it's actually mentioned in the history of Saugerties. And the author talks about it's the highest concentration of Revolutionary War veterans in Saugerties. So my interest was piqued. And so did a little research on Find a Grave, did a little family searching, realized that I was related to 83 of the 186 people that are buried.
Oh, that's fantastic. That is so cool.
Seriously. So, we're in. And so, but our friend Bob, he's in his 80s. He's a Vietnam veteran. He's dying of Agent Orange exposure, and he just doesn't have the health that he once had. And so we communicated back and forth for quite a bit. And I said, look, let's just come out and we'll take a look. So last February, it's about this time last year, we made the trip over, did an overnighter, met with him and his wife. We went out to the Finger Ground. We looked around, and we had 6 8 foot tall Japanese knotweed. It's an invasive species.
You couldn't see the headstone.
Yeah, I mean, it was just it's a jungle.
Covered.
And I don't know. We just looked at the task and thought, well, we're able-bodied, so let's do it.
Let's try it.
To Diane's compliment earlier, we were enthusiastic. We were like, well, why not? Let's just try it. I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen? And so in March of last year, we had our first session. We turned to social media. We built a page, on Facebook. I sent it out to all my friends there that are local. We started pushing as much as we could, and lo and behold, we had, I think, 5 of us the first time, and then we just decided we'd go out once a month because it's about 3 hours to get there, and we'd go once a month on the weekend, and we'd spend as much time as we could, and we'd do what we could, and then we just keep building. But obviously, by April, it became apparent that people wanted to donate to the cause, and so I realized, like, well, probably one of the ways to incentivize people to help would be to form a nonprofit, so we have some legitimacy. So, the tax incentive to deduct that from your taxes. And so we did. And it's just grown and spiraled from there. We probably have, on a good day, we probably have a dozen or so volunteers that come out. And we've taught them how to reset headstones. We've taught them how to clean. We've taught them how to repair. And in the process, we're learning how to do a lot of stuff too. Yeah. So, but that was just the first project.
It always snowballs. There's the first thing, and then it goes.
Seriously, and that was a chance. Not a chance. A good friend of mine from high school. We were there in Saugerties for one of our weekends, and I was like, "Hey, let's go to dinner." So we went to dinner, and they were like, "What are you guys doing?" So I explained it to them, and I guess our enthusiasm just kind of rubbed off, and I knew they were parishioners of the local Catholic parish. And I was like, hey, you're close with Father Chris. I was like, why don't you see if we can get permission to at least clean headstones? Because they're just dark and dingy and hard to read. And I thought, we can just clean it up a little bit on our extra time. And
Dianne taught us how to clean headstones back in 2018. So we were taught well.
Yeah, we knew how to do that. So that was our investment. We thought, we can clean some headstones, make it look a little nicer. And of course, my friend is much like me and big visions. And so lo and behold, May comes around last year, and he's like, so Father Chris has named me as the graveyard warden. We've got money. We've got, the garage. got all the stuff. And so he was like, let's do this. And so it literally became on Saturday we work on Finger Ground, on Sunday we work at St. Mary's, and we did that all the way up through November. And yeah, so we've got two projects going on, and then because we were bored and you can't do a lot of repair work in the wintertime, we started clearing the ground on a couple other locations that are close by where our friends live there. And so, yeah, here we are.
I love
That's
it.
amazing to have that much support.
Oh, yeah.
It was,
Yeah.
absolutely
That is,
phenomenal.
that's incredible. You
And-
don't usually find that.
No.
Nice to have smaller plots.
Embedding.
Evergreen being so vast, and
Yeah.
the
Yes.
acres that it is, we can walk upon something that's 30 headstones and think this is doable because it's not
Yeah.
going to take forever. St.
Yeah.
Mary's will take us a few years. They've got,
Well, probably a decade.
when you really, they have a hill, they have toppled
Yeah,
stones, they have,
a lot of work.
yeah, it's a,
Yeah, but it's fun. It's just amazing to see the power of community, right? People want to be involved. They want to do something to preserve that history. And so when you show them how easy it is to do a simple thing like cleaning, they just get so excited. And they want to keep going, right? And they don't want to stop. And then once you learn how to start repairing the headstones, it's not so scary. But I think probably our biggest challenge that we've learned is that there's a giant community out there, and there are as many opinions on how things should be done versus not be done. So you just have to, I've learned, like, get a thick skin. Some people are like, well, I would never do it that way, and it's like, yeah, okay, I get that, but there are people that do it that way, and it's just as good. And so, we espouse that philosophy. Do no harm. Do the least amount of things that you have to do to restore stone. We're just trying to follow those principles, and help everybody else, and cringe when we see people talking about, oh, use cement or go pour ammonia on that stone. And it's like, no.
No, don't do that.
No,
Yeah.
no, no, no,
Yeah,
no.
there is so much misinformation on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
People have said, oh, well, I saw this on YouTube, so I'll come out and do that.
Like, I saw this one person, they were using bleach, and I was like, no, please
Yes.
don't use bleach on the stones. Just,
Yeah.
I know we want it to be white again, but not using bleach. That's not what that's for.
Right.
or a power washer, or
it's a gentle, like you said, it's the do no harm. You do the least amount of work to make the best possible situation happen for that stone.
And we're trying not to make them new again.
Right.
We're just trying to bring them back, so that people can appreciate them and see what's written on them, and try to preserve them for the long term.
The thing we've noticed out here, which is obvious, I guess, is we have humidity.
Oh.
Yes, you do.
So we have biological growth that we weren't used to, because at Evergreen really is a century of dirt. It's just a lot of dirt, and we have the moss and the lichen and awful staining biological growth that sometimes it's not as easy just to scrub and walk away.
Right.
And have had to use D2 and walk away from it, hoping it'll kill it, and so we can scrape it off.
Yeah, we purchased gallons of D2. Like, I've been eyeing the 5-gallon pail, because I'm like, okay, we're probably going to burn through that in the first couple months, right? But
there's just so much of it.
But I got to tell you, it's so cool, right? So we went to this one cemetery in Stowe. No, not Stowe. Where was it?
Yeah, it was in Stowe.
Stowe, Massachusetts. Yeah. Anyway, Jenny had some 7th, 8th, 9th.
Great grandparents.
And so we go into the cemetery, and there's just, like, you can't see the stone. It's just lichen. And so it was so cool, because we kind of figured out, okay, we think they're here. And so we started with the first one. We wet it down, and we waited, and we kind of talk about so therapeutic. You take that paint scraper, and you just do the wide swath across the stone, and you're like, oh,
lettering.
And so, and then we found, mom and dad, and then there was a third stone in this little cluster. I'm like, I bet you that's a relative. And she's like, let's see. And so we wet it down, and so she stood back to kind of get an angle on it, and I just start to scrape, and she's like, okay, who is it? It's like the great reveal, right?
Yeah.
She's like, okay, who is it?
It was Elijah.
Yeah.
He's an uncle.
So, and it's just, that's so fun. And then, you see there in the background, right? That was a group of youth that we actually had that came out. There was probably 30 some youth
Mhm.
that came out and they just wanted an afternoon. They were like, we want to do billion graves and we want to learn how to clean headstones.
Yeah.
And so we brought them out and they worked in teams of 2s and 3s and 4s. And they were just amazing.
Yeah.
And to hear the oohs and the ahs, oh, this is so cool.
And even to have them read dates and think
Yeah.
what they were living through, you know,
Yeah.
to
Yes.
go through the dash and what these people were surviving. It gave them a newfound respect. And at the end, you know, we had to call everybody together, sun's going down, and they didn't want to stop,
Yeah.
you know, it was,
Oh,
that was
so cool.
That's one of the best things about inviting young people to do this stuff is it makes history a little more real to them when they see those headstones and they see the names and they see the dates. And
Yeah.
back east, especially, there's a lot of your headstones that'll even tell like the whole story of somebody
yeah.
or a good chunk of their story.
right.
And I think sometimes when you bring them to read that stuff, then it hits them that these really were real people. They're not just people that were in our history books,
Mhm.
you know, and it changes. And then hopefully it develops that excitement and the passion to continue this as they get older, so that when we're all too old to do it anymore, they will
Yeah.
come back and take over for us, because
If-
at some
yeah.
point we won't be able to do what we do now. So,
That's right.
Right.
Well, and if nothing else, I think one of the things that we've like it's like all our friends know what we do, and so everyone like literally they're like, oh, I was driving the other day, I passed the cemetery, must have passed it 1,000 times in my life and never gave it a second thought, but now that's all I see whenever I drive by, and I think of you guys, and I'm like, well, I guess there's worse things. So
right. Yeah, I think that's funny too. And somebody else, I had a coworker who went to Europe last year, and she actually stopped in several cemeteries and took pictures for me, because she was like, I thought of you every time we were going by.
Yeah.
And I thought that was hilarious. And she is not necessarily a cemetery person. When she first heard about the podcast,
Yeah.
she was like, you're going to talk about cemeteries and dead people. And she thought it was a little creepy. And here she was sending me pictures. So
That's
I was
awesome.
like, if it inspires you to remember the history and to realize that this is stories and real people and countries are founded on where these people are buried, then I'm okay with that.
Well, and then with 2025 and 2026 gearing up for the bicentennial, I almost said centennial bicentennial. We had the centennial bicentennial, but you guys with the it's a quasi-centennial, not bicentennial. You probably will get so much more support. I mean, it's like a huge
I don't know.
opportunity.
I'm still learning about New England and how many little towns there are. It's not just big cities like, you know, we were used to.
Right.
And every town has their own historical society.
Mm-hmm.
It just depends on how active they are. And it's interesting. I think obviously you would think the 60 plus crowd are the ones in the historical society, because they're the ones that have the time or the patience to deal with it or
Right.
have
The
the
love of
interest.
history, yeah.
Right. And so it's a matter of how do you get the younger generations to get into it? And depending on how active they are, how much support you would get from that town's, because
Mhm.
every town has many burial plots. It's not just the ones.
Yes.
So it's
Well, and my experience from being not only in Massachusetts, but some of the other East Coast states is there's a lot of the small, like the churchyards or wherever the meeting houses were, depending on who was settling there. But then, of course, you have the larger cemeteries as they moved out of town to do it. So yes, there's cemeteries all over Massachusetts
all over.
and everywhere you go.
Yep.
I think the key, though, to getting the younger people involved is to find those things that, again, you kind of have to bring history to life and bring them something where they can make that connection.
Yep.
That events and people and things really did happen. When they just look at it and on a notebook or something, it's kind of like, whatever.
Mhm.
But when you involve them in some way, so I think for those smaller historical societies, like you said, that are the older people are the ones running it and in charge, they really do need to think about some activities where they bring in the young people and say, this is for our youth, so that they develop that passion in history, and then they come back and they're like, okay, we'll take over and we'll do it for you.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, we're trying to lower the median age in a lot of these historical societies, by at least a decade.
Yeah, let's stop by that much.
Yeah, it's tough, but it can be very rewarding when it happens. I know with our Beyond the Grave event, because we involve the high school students, some of them have gotten really excited about spending time at the cemetery because it's something they never thought about doing, and definitely not in a positive manner, like we're here to learn something. And so they're there. Obviously they're performing, and so involving theater students, you get the excitement of theater, but they've developed an appreciation for the cemetery that I don't think they would have had before, because nobody ever thought to say, come hang out in the cemetery with us all day.
Yeah,
and all night in this case.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
We're there in the dark.
It'll be great.
Yes. But it's so fun. I'm glad that you're finding ways to get them involved, and that you're finding ways to, wake up these historical societies and be like, let's do this.
It's been interesting, right? Yeah, you see some are like, yeah, have at it, man, like go for it, right? And it's been interesting. Again, the community is such there are very extreme opinions on both sides, right? You get the folks that are like, well, if you're not the lineal descendant of that plot, then you have no business. And it's like, okay, I can appreciate that, except 200, 300 years later, there's probably hundreds of lineal descendants that we would have to go track down. Who exactly gets to have the final say? And so you have some of that. You get some that are like, absolutely not, don't touch anything, we're good. In fact, literally a couple miles down the road, privately owned, beautiful, well, once was a beautiful cemetery just over the line in Rhode Island. And this woman wants no help. She wants nothing. She's like, don't, everybody stay out. And history is being lost because of it. And then you have others that are like, yeah, have at it, man. Like, go for it. Like, clear them all out. Well, and, like our work in Saugerties, people, it was funny because when we started, the first issue that had held volunteers back previously was they were like, well, who owns it? And what we love is that Ulster County, New York has a parcel viewer. So you can literally go in and look at every parcel of land and who owns it.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, so we went and we found cemetery plot, and we looked, and it had this old association, but that association is so defunct, it probably hasn't existed in over 100 years with anybody on a board.
Wow.
So they were held back by that, and they went to the church across the road, and they thought, well, it sounds like the church might be the owner. They didn't really get a clear answer, which I didn't understand why they didn't get a clear answer. And then there's another cemetery just to the north of that church. So you have these two cemeteries in this church, and everybody's trying to figure some things out. So we did as much sleuthing as we could. So we went to the church first. I pushed it and just said, we need to understand. Do you have responsibility for this location? And they initially came back and said, yeah, no, we don't. And then they came back later and said, yeah, we definitely don't, because the insurance company does not cover for that property. So
there you
that's
go.
not ours. And we were like, okay. So then we thought we'll go one step further. We went to the cemetery that was just to the north of the church, because back in the day, there were these two cemetery associations that merged in 1924. So we thought, well, let's just go check out and give them the option to tell us no. And we did. And, the gentleman was like, I've been groundskeeping here for 15 years. And he's like, and I have never gone over there. He goes, I'm pretty sure.
And we were like, we know.
Yeah.
We can tell.
Oh, you sure? Yeah. So we just pressed ahead, right? And then and again, it's nice in a small town, people. So I reached out to the town supervisor, who was a high school friend of mine. And I just said, hey, Fred, this is what we're going to do. This is the assumption we're going to make. We sure would love it if the town would follow the recommendations that the state has put in place, which is if it hasn't had an active burial in 15 years and no one has claimed to it, that the town would, publish a public notice, run that for a couple of months, and then hold a hearing to formally adopt that abandoned property as township responsibility. He was like, yeah, not really want to do that. And I'm like, that's fine, but just know that we're going to go and do it. He was like, go ahead and have fun. And so yeah, he's been great to have, because as we announce each one that we're going upon, he's like, oh, let me know what you need. So yeah,
he's just resigned at this point to the fact that you're going to do it anyway. Much. So
well, so again, talking with our friends, wishing how nice it would be. Like maybe if we go to the town supervisor, they could, allocate an annual salary for me, and we could just become the full-time keepers of all 70 some, cemeteries and burial grounds in the township. And he was like, buddy, town supervisor makes like a third of that. 'Cause I threw out a number because I'm like, we need a certain amount to live. And he was like, yeah, good luck with that. And I was like, well, you can always have a dream. You can always have a dream.
Yeah, because you know what? You don't put it out there, you
That's
never
right.
know.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, and something else that's been so much fun. And again, we'd love to get stuff closer to home,
Yeah.
and we have. We came upon, another historical society just happened to be doing like a walking tour one day as we were going to go photograph for Billion Graves. So we've made a connection there. So there's some work we're going to do locally, and hopefully spread that out a little more on the other weekends because,
Yeah.
6 hour round trip is tedious. But for
Yeah.
Saugerties, a wonderful, wonderful example of community. Again, the Kiwanis Club of Saugerties has been huge. Um, our friend went, he's a member of the Kiwanis and well known in the community, went to them initially, this was back early summer, and said, hey, one of the things we are in desperate need of is a tripod and a hoist. And that was about a $3,000 expenditure, a little over
Yeah.
3,000 for everything we needed. And, we'd already outlaid thousands for a tombstone jack and for Monument and other things we knew we needed. And I was like, I can't, I'm tapped. And they came back without hesitation. They were like, here you go, use it for restoring, more of this kind of work here in the
Oh, I
town.
love that.
Cool.
And so, yeah, and then on top of that, he went back to them again because that hillside that Jenny mentioned, it's just erosion, and we got headstones leaning 45-degree angles. It needs some help. He went back to them, and Kiwanis was like, "Here's 10 grand. Will that do?" And he's like, "Well, we're gonna find out." But again, he's pulled in all the community help and his friends and his
I
connections,
love that.
and we're actually going to go back to them yet again to ask for more help with a mini excavator
There you go.
because I'm tired of digging with a pickaxe.
I like that.
So we're like, it's only this wide, and if we can get it in between those headstones and just dig with a couple scoops rather than and finish off. So I don't know. I mean, we're just gonna see where it goes.
Yeah, you just keep asking.
Well, that's the thing. That's one thing I've learned about a lot of things over the years. If you don't ask, you won't. I mean, they might say
Right.
no, they might not be able
Yep.
to or whatever, but if you don't ask,
That's
you don't
okay.
get an
Yeah.
answer either way.
That's
So
right. That's right.
you have to reach out, you have to ask, and you just keep going. And if they say no, you find the next group, you move on to the next one. And somebody at some point will eventually say yes because they develop that interest or they want to do it. And there's always that one person or that one group who had thought about it before, didn't know how to go about it. And then you show up with the know-how, and then they're like, oh, great, now we can get involved because here's somebody who actually knows how to do it and that can teach us. And so, I mean, and it sounds like you're doing a lot of that, even when you're not actually actively teaching, but when you reach out like that, you're showing that there is a way to do all of this. And I think that probably helps generate that community again, because you're like, yeah, we can totally take this on and this can totally be done and saved. And here's how we do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only fear is I got to stop saying yes to everything.
Yeah.
Welcome to the club.
We got to plan out our lives a little better because I'm like, look, we're doing nothing. Like we can't even go on vacation anymore. There's something else we got to do.
We can. It's just in the cemetery.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Or you could go vacation in the winter on the,
Yeah.
but
maybe
that's
the
where you
southern
do the other
hemisphere.
work. Go find those overgrown cemeteries. So yeah, we're hooked, and
There's too
it's
many.
fun. It's fun because as we go out, we have more friends that get hooked. I mean, we had
Love
our
it.
friends here in Massachusetts that where we came to see every year. They go out with us now, and they love it. And they have a place up in Vermont, and so this was back in
Ooh.
the fall. We literally went trekking. I had like a dozen of these little tiny places I wanted to go find. So we jumped in the Jeep and we spent the entire afternoon, and we went to all these little places that you wouldn't even think to go look for a cemetery,
Yeah.
and just to discover the hidden history. And they just get excited, and they want to take photos, and they're like, we want to come back. How can we clean them? How can we repair them? You got to teach us how to do this. And so yeah, it's fun.
You're
And
going to have a whole army of people on the East Coast driving around with like
That's the
D2
goal.
and stuff in the back of their cars,
Yes.
just ready to pop out and get it cleaned.
oh,
I
wouldn't
hope
that be
so.
cool?
There's
That
too
would be
many
so cool.
stones for us.
Yeah.
So we need more people,
Yep.
that's for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and like you said, I love the lichen, like to a small degree on the cemetery, on the headstones, because it looks really cool. But
Yeah.
when it does get to the point where it's so overgrown that you can no longer read the stone or see the artwork that's been carved into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like I said, you guys are going to develop your whole little army and all across New England. People are
That
going to
would
be
cool.
Yeah,
stopping and at least cleaning the stones. So,
Yeah.
We better order more t-shirts.
No.
I was going to say you could have what would it be? In each state could have their own gravestone
Guardians
guardian
chapter.
chapter.
Yeah,
That was what
there
I
you
couldn't
go.
There
think
you
of.
go.
That's an
Gravestone
idea.
Guardians, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Vermont,
Yeah, we
get them
gotta
all.
think big. We gotta think big.
Yeah.
There you go. Spread it all out. Bring us the joy. So, in all of your cleaning and restoring and everything, you guys also take time to do some of the research on some of the people.
Oh, yeah.
And so, have you come across any like really interesting stories? Obviously, you found family.
We did, yes.
In both
Fun.
cases.
Yes, and I
Um,
have a list on my phone now of every town they're in. So if we happen to be in a town, I can be like, wait, we got to go see my ninth great grandfather.
I mean, that is so cool. Because I was going to ask you what have been your favorite. It's like asking which of the two girls is your favorite. But
It's hard.
yeah, which has been your favorite story, your most surprising story?
We were in Chepachet, Rhode
Rhode
Island,
Island.
and we were just documenting photos for Billion Graves.
mhm.
And I ran across a stone that said our adopted daughter.
Was a Zinky.
No,
Ooh,
it
a
wasn't.
Zinky.
No, it wasn't.
Ah,
We do see those, but this
Yeah.
wasn't a Zinky. But it said our adopted daughter, and I thought that's interesting. You don't see the word adopted often on a headstone.
Often, yeah.
And her parents were right next to her. And I thought, I want to look up her parents because it's inevitably, as we're leaving a cemetery, I'm on my phone trying to find information on somebody.
and she's like, "Hey, look what I found!" And I'm like, "How do you?"
Because some headstone was like, learn about me. You want to hear about me. So I looked up the parents, and they were actually little people in a circus.
Oh, wow.
And they were 3 feet tall, maybe.
Yeah.
And there were pictures.
Oh,
And her hair was really long,
Yeah.
and they
Oh,
adopted this
wow.
little girl. She actually died when she was, I think, 6 from some childhood illness. So she didn't get to be very old, but it was not what I expected. It just was,
Right.
you just never know. It was an unassuming
Right.
headstone that was not anything miraculously ornate or anything. But there were, you hit that sweet spot of 1880 to 1920. You get some really good photos, and you kind of cross your fingers as you hit the search button to something pop up, and I'm freaking out in the car. You've got to see this, and he's driving. And I'm like, hurry, get home! I have to show you things.
well, and then on top of that, she's related to everybody in New England. And yeah, seriously, like I don't know that there's been a location we've gone to where she doesn't walk away. She's like, "Oh yeah, and that's my 8th cousin's time room." And I'm like, "How do you do that?" But it's been fun because when we went to New York and we were standing in this circle at the finger ground back in the spring, and we were all just kind of like, "How are we connected here?" And like all of us in the circle were related to each other, distant cousins somehow, right? And she was like, "Wow, for the first time, I feel like an outsider." She's like, "I'm not related to anybody." I was like, "Yeah, welcome."
Now you know how I feel every time we go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it's been fun
Yep.
that we both get to have that connection to our roots.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is
out here. So
Yep.
that's so cool because it just shows how we could be so distant yet so very close.
absolutely.
Well, and it's funny too because when you make those connections, and then when you find these living relatives, even though it's so distant, there's just the kinship there, right? And it just becomes like when you're like, "Hey, I'll see you next time, cuz," and it's just you're like, "Yeah," because we are like,
Yeah.
it just something changes in your brain, and it's just there's a connection there, and it's like that's my kin.
It's been really fun.
Yeah. So the discovery has been wonderful, and teaching people how to do that as well has been a lot of fun, right? So many resources that are available, and they just need to learn how to use the tools and uncover the stories. And it's like, look, we don't have any magic that we do here. This is just about knowing where to go and having a little tenacity and a little creativity when you're trying to search for a surname. Do you add the E? Do you drop the E? Do you try to misspell it and see what you get? Just,
Yeah.
Yeah, spelling is always a big one when you're going through it. Also,
Yep.
my other thing, and I've said this before when I've researched some of the stories we've shared here, is the number of times, especially through the 1800s, where families had the same name multiple times.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so you think you found the right person and you're going through it, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, this date doesn't match up anymore. Oh no, because this was a child, a grandchild, a nephew, whatever. And I'm always like, oh, could we have branched out in the name department just a little bit?
There's lots of names out there, and we stuck with Mary every single time.
Yeah, that's so original.
I know. It's so hard. It's just like trying to find the names. But it does make it a lot of fun to try and go. And I like the mystery of it all. I was a big fan of Nancy Drew growing up and reading all the Nancy Drew books. This is my chance to kind of be Nancy Drew without the danger side of it. That she was always in, going through digging all the genealogy.
When you can solve that mystery, it becomes, it means more. If it came to you so quickly and easily, it would be what it is, but it's fun to dig a little more.
Well, and again, it brings people connection, right? So there's this other little family ground in Saugerties that's like literally just, it's, as the crow flies, it's maybe a quarter mile from our friend's home, and they had never noticed. I was like, but once you see it, you're never not going to see it, right? So we come around the corner from his house, and I was like, see? And he's like, you're right, I'm never going to not see that now. So we've been working in that one, and that was kind of fun because we did some bushwhacking for an hour a couple weekends ago before the snow came, and just very tall monument in there, and everything else is lower headstones, what have you. And so I did some research, and come to find out, his name was Henry Martin, and Henry Martin became the postmaster of the Glasgow Post Office in New York in 1823. He served in that capacity until at least 1855. And then was running a tavern, which the tavern is located right in front of where this family burial ground is. So you start peeling back the layers, and you're like, this all makes sense as to why this is the way this is. When we start telling people these things, they're like, wait, no way. Like, he's buried right there, like behind those trees. Like,
see that really tall monument?
Yeah, exactly. So,
well, and that means, if he was the postmaster and then he owned a tavern, he was important to his town at that point in his life. Everybody would have known him. And he, even if he wasn't involved, I'm sure he was involved in politics a little bit, being the tavern owner, all of that kind of stuff, it all would have come through him. So he was a fixture in the community.
Yeah, well, and then you look at the census record for 1860, and he had property valued at $10,000, which in today's dollars is like $470,000.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So you weren't doing too bad for yourself.
And our initial approach to that cemetery was, wow, Henry Martin must have had money, and that's all you think, and then you walk away. He's the tall, he's the one that's the biggest.
Yeah, you just
and now we know.
But
and
also,
I'm related to him.
You are related to him?
Oh yeah.
Love it. I love that.
Yeah.
But like you said, sometimes it's the unassuming headstones that have the most interesting stories too. Sometimes, and I've come across this where I'll try and research the really grand ones, and I don't really find much. But then you research one just out of the blue there's nothing on it other than maybe a name and some dates. And then you find those stories, like your little family that you've found. It's just amazing what pops up when you really start to look.
And there's a bunch of them like that at Evergreen. I think most of the research I did over there, the best stories were the ones, the stones were not grand, or they were just a regular old headstone you'd walk right by.
Yeah, dates and a dash, right?
Yeah.
So it's trying to find out the dash.
The gentleman we interviewed, was it last week, that he was going through and looking for and researching the people who didn't have headstones.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
And some of the amazing stories from people who were unmarked.
Wow.
So
ask.
Yeah.
Wow.
Can you imagine doing that?
This will be the episode we recorded with him will actually come out after this one, but he had found in one of the cemeteries he was working in a lot. I forget what all of the unmarked graves or how many there were, but he was responsible for getting a larger monument placed eventually that at least lists everybody that they've discovered so far. So
Wow.
even the unmarked graves are now have the names are still there. Somebody can go in and you can see that these people they had died
in an explosion during
in
the
an
Civil War.
explosion.
Oh,
They were
during the
young
Civil War,
girls.
yeah.
They were young
wow.
teenage girls, and they were the immigrant girls. So it was sort of like almost like the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory.
Yeah.
It was a gunpowder or an
It was
ammunitions factory is what it
ammunition
was.
factory.
Oh,
Yeah.
my goodness.
And they had taken over working for their fathers or their brothers or whatever because they had said, if you come and work here, then you won't lose your job, even if they went off to serve in the Confederate Army. They were able to keep those jobs. But unfortunately, due to the nature of what they were doing, an accident occurred and several of them lost their lives in that particular explosion. So it was very interesting. And so he's been responsible for making sure that they're not forgotten and that story doesn't get forgotten because so many people lost their lives that time.
Yeah.
And that was one of those ones where I kind of was like, when we talk about the Civil War, there was a lot of death, obviously. But we tend to think about all the men who died during that war, during the conflict, because it was them fighting back and forth. You don't think about something like that, though. I mean,
Everybody
obviously,
else,
these girls were technically supporting the war effort, working there, and then lost their lives and didn't get a chance to get married and have children and do all the things that they had probably planned to do someday.
Or even be
story
marked.
that story got forgotten. So he made sure that one continued.
Oh, good for him.
Yeah.
Have you found buried headstones, which I'm sure you have?
I don't know that we've found any hidden ones. I think what we've been surprised by is, you think it's a simple tablet, and then you find like the plinth, and then you find the base, and you're like, okay, well, we thought this was going to be an easy one, and now it's going to be a 3-stage repair. You're like, okay.
And there's cement attached to the base.
Oh, yeah. We've had, oh gosh. Well, and I think we tackled the biggest one we've done, and I don't think I sent this photo, but it was probably a 15-foot tall obelisk on this really fat base, and we ended up with a 40-ton forklift coming out to help, and big lifting straps, and and the whole time I'm thinking, like, what are we doing? Like, I don't know what I'm doing, but we're like, all right, we'll just put the strap over here, and we'll do the thing, and then we're gonna lift and keep your toes out from underneath it and whatever. And so we thought we had this thing. We were like, we're good. This is gonna be so great. And then as we go to set it in place, and the other piece was we use Monugrid. So Monugrid is a soil strengthener, right? And so it's just like a big plastic grid. You fill it in with gravel. It'll help with soil erosion. It'll help with keeping things level. Well, and so here I thought we were so cool because we had got it all laid out. It looks really good. It's all level. It's ready for this big fat piece of stone. And we set it on there, and I'm like, the corner's not on the ground. Like,
oh no.
What's happened here? And so I get down on my hands and knees and I look, and sure enough, there's concrete. And I'm like, we are not lifting this thing up to get underneath there. Like, we can't. There's no way.
Right.
So it's like, well, we're just gonna infill with a bunch of gravel and dirt, and we're gonna call it good. And so we got that piece on, and then it was the obelisk had broken, so we put the two pieces back. We got those back epoxied and put the cross on top. And
it was like always one more piece.
Yeah,
It just got taller and taller.
Like, oh my gosh! And so and now we're gonna go back as soon as we get warm weather. We're gonna use Lithomex, and we got slate colored, so it'll blend in nice with the obelisk color. Get that all smoothed out and finished again. And the stone has been neglected for probably 20 years, and more than that, because there was a church fire back in like '89, and they had to move some of the monuments out of the way so the crane could get in and do the repair on the steeple and the roof. And so they just pushed everything to the side, and then they were like, well, we don't know what to do, so it just sat. So yeah, it's probably the most complex one. Everything else has been fairly lower to the ground, but there's more coming. So we're so hence why we're going to ask for a mini excavator.
I think that's brilliant, and hopefully that goes well for
Oh,
you guys.
that'd be
So
cool. Power tools.
one of the pictures that you did send us that Dianne was
Yeah.
super fascinated by, so folks who are watching on YouTube, is behind me, and you are standing in a hole here.
Yeah.
David is standing in the hole. So tell us a little bit about what was happening this day and
Oh.
how you were going about this whole project here.
This was at Finger Ground.
Yeah, so this is Finger Ground. So this is where our Revolutionary War and our War of 1812 veterans are. You can see the flags there. So this was kind of fun. So this is a husband and wife, and they were actually, if you're looking at that picture, to the left. So two headstones to the left of where I'm standing. And they were kind of interspersed between those stones, and they were just at angles. And we couldn't, I was like, okay. And so, and all we had were those top pieces, right? Because you see the bottom pieces in that picture.
Right.
Well, as we started to look at like, okay, where should we put these back? We just kind of saw the space in between, and we thought, that's probably a decent spot to do that. And so as we started to dig, lo and behold, we get a thunk, and I'm like, oh. So we dig a little bit more. We're like, oh, this is the bottom of one of those stones. And then, we started digging and thunk. Oh, there's the bottom of the other one of these. So the fun part was that this was a huge pain. There were roots. There were so many roots, and just the soil was easy to dig, which was really nice. But man, those roots, I was so done. And so, but then obviously we were looking at where the break was and how tall they were, and we were like, well, but we were hesitant to do the repair and put the pieces back together and then set them, only because those breaks would be right about the soil line. And we were like, well, I was like, you know what though? We're going to be fine. We're just going to go ahead and do this. And so, yeah, but in order to get enough dirt out so we could get some good gravel base in, and then get those bottom pieces situated, and then the tops, yeah, so I just kept digging. And like I said, my thought as I was digging was, they talk about the fact that when you get about 4 feet, you might actually find something. And so I was like, we're just gonna have to be good now, because you try to follow the rule of a third, right?
Right.
Total length of the stone, we go about a third. I was like, I'm pretty close. I'm like, we're just gonna go for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then we brought in the tripod and the hoist, and we got the bases squared away, and then we brought the tops in, and they're done now, and they're beautiful, and we're gonna clean them in the spring, and they're gonna look great. So
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And a lot of work. So thanks for doing that for this couple
yeah.
because
yeah, exactly. So
and you have to think about New England is full of trees. So for any of our listeners, especially who aren't in America that may not know New England has trees all over the place. So your root systems are probably crazy.
Yeah.
They are far-reaching.
yeah,
Yes.
I've hit a root and I look around thinking, where's the tree? Because it's not right immediate, but it must be the one over there. And it's, they're everywhere.
yeah.
I mean, it's what I like about New England in the fall because of all the trees.
Exactly.
It's beautiful.
So pretty. Yeah,
They
you're like,
have their
this is
place.
great. Yeah.
They have their place.
And our challenge here at Finger Ground is the fact that this Japanese knotweed, and so when we showed up on the scene, we did some research on this stuff. It's invasive. They talk about different ways that you can get rid of it. But at the end of the day, I made the executive decision that we would dig out every single one.
Oh wow.
And so the problem with this knotweed stuff is it'll grow 6 feet down, and the rhizome goes in every direction. And everybody's like, yeah, good luck getting rid of it. And I'm like, well, we're going to do what we can. So we actually spent like the first couple months of last year, the first couple sessions, all we did was dig out this knotweed and rake and clear and what have you. And obviously you can see behind you now, you can see the whole cemetery, front to back, side to side, and it's been absolutely wonderful.
By the third, I think about the third project day, we hadn't touched the headstone.
Yeah, in May.
And our volunteers were like, okay, we're pretty much groundskeepers. We're just clearing the land. And he's like, get the sprayer. We need to clean a headstone right now.
I was like, let's clean. Let's do some resets. Let's have some fun now. So, yeah.
Well, and like you said, there's a lot of veterans, and I mean, I could see the veterans' headstones in that photo. So I'm so glad that you guys were able to go and clean that up and give them the respect they deserve for all they did.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and to Diane's point earlier about the 250th, I mean, that's next year. And so the idea behind it was, if we could get this good to go and back in really good shape, we'd like to do a rededication of sorts as part of those 250th anniversary events. And so, we'll work with the VFW and the American Legion. We'll work with the town, and we'll just try to make a big to-do out of this.
We were able to put a flagpole
Oh yeah,
in the cemetery.
yeah, that
Oh,
was so.
that's good.
Yeah, so we got a flagpole up, and we got the Betsy Ross flag flying, and it's illuminated
Oh,
24/7.
oh, I
And
just got
just
chills just thinking
Yeah.
about
yeah,
it. It is
It
so
was quite a
cool.
moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all kind of
Oh.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it was really cool.
so and we have a sign. We have a beautiful sign that we're going to install as soon as we can
The ground gets
pour the concrete, right? But yeah, we had a gentleman in Phoenicia, is nearby in Ulster County, and I reached out to him. Everybody wanted like $1,000 or more, and I reached out and just said, "Hey, I'm a veteran. We're doing this, as a service. Can you help?" So he gave it to us for like at cost, which was like half of what everybody else
Oh,
was charging.
good.
So,
Oh,
oh, it's a beautiful sign.
Beautiful.
So, between the sign and the flagpole and the town came in and they poured gravel. It was like this big mud pit when you drove up. Ruts and just years
Ugh.
of water it was,
Yeah.
these guys came in 2 giant truckloads of gravel and a roller, and they like leveled it all out and made a beautiful place for people to come down. So,
it'd be nice if all communities would do that.
I know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's made a huge impact.
one by one stone at a time. That's our
Well, yeah, you guys are setting examples, so hopefully other people will say, "Hey, look what they're doing. Maybe we should do the same thing in our community with our cemeteries."
Yeah.
Right.
would be nice.
Very gratifying for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that you guys, I mean, obviously we appreciated having you in Colorado, but New York, even though you're in Massachusetts where you live, New York is very lucky to have you back there to help with this cemetery and so many of the others. And again, you're inspiring people who had never thought about spending
Yeah.
the time doing this to
Yep.
go in and do it, and you're getting them excited, and that will just grow because they'll excite somebody else, and eventually, as our goal has been, you get people across the country just getting excited about their cemeteries and taking care of them, and being brave about it. Because I know when I first started doing some of this, the cleaning, even just cleaning the headstones, intimidated me because I didn't want to screw it up.
Right.
You don't
Yep.
want to mess up a head, especially if I'm not a descendant, but I want to just help out.
Yeah.
And so the thought of like touching that stone and doing anything that might make it worse freaked me out. I know better now, but I didn't know initially. But I know there's other people that's part of their hesitation is they just don't know what to do, so they
Right.
don't do it.
Yep.
Mhm.
And so having somebody like yourselves who can say, no, come on in. It's a learning process, but we can start small and people grow from there. So, and being able to put the correct information out in the community too. Again, we've said it many times, don't rely on all the video. There are some good ones on YouTube and TikTok and stuff that are doing the right things.
And
There's
then there's
also a
some
lot that
not.
aren't.
Oh my word, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some that gave us nightmares.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think the other fun thing we've made connections now across all these different little places. I mean, different individuals and groups that are coming together through the power of social media, right? And so they're sharing, and I'm reaching out to folks. I mean, I built my network just by reaching out and saying, hey, we're getting started in this. We know some things, but certainly we don't know all things.
Right.
And so can I include you in my network of people I can reach out to? And so it's been fun, take a photo of something and go and shoot that out to 3 or 4 different folks and say, okay, guys, gals, tell me what you do here. This is my thought. Here's what I'd like to do.
Yeah.
Tell me whether I'm being smart about this or there's something else I need to do here. And it's just been so great. They are so welcoming. They want people to ask questions, and I think the other challenge has been that we've recognized a business opportunity. The business opportunity is that there is no formal like place to go to learn all this, right? And so there's not.
That's true.
There was an organization in Ohio that was doing things for a while, but they've kind of fallen off and they don't do much anymore. And there's a couple other places that are doing some things, but not really. And so what we realized was like, what if we put together like a national center of excellence, right? People could come for a week and we could teach them how to do, the basics up to, the more complex things, right? So at least when they walk away, they've at least been armed with, knowledgeable people who have taught them right procedures. But I that's a vision for somebody else.
But it's a good one. And we've talked, Rachel, who's been on our show a couple times now, who's in Massachusetts, by the way. when the first time we interviewed her, she talked about that. When she first started doing the conservation thing, she didn't know what she was doing. She did the same thing you did, took over a cemetery that had been completely abandoned. Nobody had cared for it, went in not really knowing anything. And she's learned things over time, but she's had to learn things from different sources because, like you said, there is no one place when it comes to the preservation and the conservation stuff. So it's people who have learned and then are willing to teach it here and there, but it's sporadic. And like you said, it would be fabulous to have a center for that kind of thing where we could all go and
it would be so cool.
Yeah.
And we've learned certain things, like there's a group up in the Pacific Northwest, and I follow them. They're amazing because the way they document for Facebook, they literally they step by step all the way through their process on a repair.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
cool.
It is so cool. And so they literally the step by step, and they'll explain what they're doing in each of the photos. And so you're like, oh, okay, cool. How do you? But then there were certain things, like for instance, somebody had asked a question about what are those things?
Pins?
Yes, pins.
The pins.
I'm like, I know there's a word for it.
Only a gravestone person would know,
right? Those things, those evil things.
Blow out the bottom of stones. Yeah.
But these folks in the Pacific Northwest, he had taken a photo and he was talking about how he drilled them out, and I was like, how did he do that? And somebody else had already asked the question, and he's like, oh, and what he talked about was this little cool thing that I went and found. It's a diamond tipped drill bit, drill bit, and it's hollow. And so he was like, oh, he goes, I just put that on my angle grinder, and I go over the top of that pin, and I just go down enough over the top of that pin to get into the stone, and because it's diamond tipped, it's going to make a nice clean cut in that stone. And then we just usually just tap it out and it comes right up. And I'm like, that's brilliant.
And it does almost no damage to the stone that way when you're doing that.
Exactly. So, I'm excited to try this. We've got a couple of these. We've got many of these to work on. Because there's pins everywhere. So anyway, but yeah, it's just fun because somebody shared this and I was like, I would have never thought to do that because you use these on like granite countertops, like granite and marble. Countertops. So I was like, why wouldn't you use it on a headstone? I'm like, duh. So anyway, more adventures.
Well, like you said, he only has to go down far enough to get to it to just and then be able to pull that pin out and
and I was like, you can do that? Like,
it's easy.
Like what? So
no, that's great.
It's not even fair because it's so easy.
Yeah, I know, because gosh, we've tried everything to get pins out, right? And so, but you don't want to do too much, and so I'm like, well, if this is a less invasive way of doing it, and I'm not going to shatter the plinth, then let's try it. So we're gonna try it.
And God forbid if something breaks, you just
we're insured. We're insured. We're good.
But
then I learned how to pour a concrete base, right? Like, create my own little slotted whatever. That's the next adventure this year is probably going to be just that, right? Creating that form and creating a concrete base with the slots so we can redo some of those broken tablet ones. So
that's what
always
we need
more
to learn how to do.
Yeah,
absolutely, always more.
But I got to tell you, there's a team of guys that does this over in Westport, Massachusetts, and they're amazing at what they do, but they make me so nervous sometimes. So like they literally, the bottom of this tablet stone was kind of jagged and not in good shape. They literally cut like 1.5 inches off the bottom of it with a stone wheel, and so they could get it nice and level. And then they put it into a new concrete slotted base. And I was like, oh.
The bravery.
I would never do that. So, but they're like, oh no, it's super easy. And I'm like, I'm sure it is, but man, that first cut's probably So I'm like,
I've heard of other people.
Maybe down the road.
Yeah, I've heard of other people doing that, but it's like.
That's scary.
That's sort of scary.
But I suppose if it's the choice being made between, look, the stone will never get set back up again,
exactly,
or you set it in the dirt, but it's going to be precarious and it's going to continue to deteriorate. Like what, and that's that whole. It's almost like being a surgeon. You got to figure out like, okay, what can I do here to preserve the life of this stone and do the least amount of damage and still have a healthy life ahead of it, right? Like So I don't know. Yeah, we're learning so much every day.
And each one's different.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, and every ground is going to be different at every location, and I mean, nothing is the same at any cemetery.
okay.
So even in a general sense, you know, they all kind of look the same when you first look at them. Then you see the headstones and you see whatever.
Yeah.
But once you actually start going through them and working in there, everything changes because every section is different. So, but like you said, the idea is to do as little harm as possible, save these stones for another maybe 80, 100 years, hopefully, and or until the next best thing comes along and we figure out something better.
Right.
Yep, that one time they used to fix everything with cement. So
yes, and we have learned.
Man, they went crazy with that stuff.
I know.
When
I always feel a little sad when I come across a headstone that's been completely repaired with cement because I look at that going,
your heart a little, huh?
Oh,
Like I can't help you. I'm sorry. Yeah.
We've learned when we come across a headstone not to say, "Oh, this will be easy. Oh, this is an easy one. Well, this should take about 5 minutes." We don't even speak that into existence. We're just like, let's start with this one.
Yeah, because you think it's a small one, and then all of a sudden it's like,
oh my gosh,
deeper and deeper. Yeah.
Buried mystery underneath that you pull out. Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. We found a few of those in the finger ground, and people I think are amazed at how long some of these tablet stones can be.
Just keep going.
Yeah, because I mean, it's crooked by a little bit, so you're like, yeah, I just want to uncrooked it, and so, but then you're like, we had to dig 7 feet in order to be able to loosen this tablet from the soil so that we could get it straightened. It's just
when you're pulling the tripod, hoisting it up, and it just keeps going. Yeah. It's just so tall that it's. Yeah.
Or the other one I love is like like, oh no, we gotta extend the legs some more. Okay, all right, bring it back down. Extend the legs. All right, go higher. How high is it? 14 feet.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
it's crazy. They're long.
So, because you guys did a lot of work out here with the military headstones, veterans headstones that they love to use cement. Do they do that back there? Do they set their stones in cement?
We haven't come across a lot.
Mm-mm.
So there's another cool story though. So we have 2 cemeteries that come to mind. One is St. Mary's. He is Daniel O'Neill, enlisted at 43 in New York City for the duration of the Civil War. Amazing, just what little you can find about him. But we came across he was one of the first stones that we looked at. And we loosened him up, and what had happened is that about 2.5 to 3 feet down from the top, the stone had broken, and so somebody had tried to set it in cement to keep it from sinking any further.
Right.
So I mean, he had this little headstone that's barely visible. Well, we dug it up. We assessed what the situation was. We applied to the VA, and the VA just delivered this past week a brand new headstone for Daniel O'Neill, which we will be able to rededicate with the VFW, the American Legion, doing military honors in the spring.
That'd be wonderful.
So, yeah, so we're excited. The other one that makes us just absolutely batty, especially being a veteran, is a little place north of where we've been focusing. And we did a drive up there because somebody from the Historical Society was like, hey, what about this stone? What do you think you guys could do with it? We got up there and we noticed that all of the military headstones are like just laying on the ground.
Oh no.
Like, doesn't even look like they fell over. Looks like they're just laying on the ground. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Like they weren't even ever set properly?
No,
they just laid them flat.
Literally just looks like they laid them
Yeah.
on the ground. And so we're trying to make connections there because, again, we're like, well, how quickly could we work on that one? Is that's not how it's supposed to be.
No.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
But yeah, fortunately, we haven't seen a lot of death by cement. I think a lot of what we've been working, thankfully, there wasn't a cement plant that was close, so it took a lot of work to get all that stuff to these places. So thankfully, we haven't seen that, so that's been good.
That's been good.
Yeah.
That makes you wonder what is the proper technique. I never thought putting them in cement was ever the proper technique. They still sunk anyway. So
Yeah.
it's not like
Well,
it kept them
it
from
only
sinking.
makes it worse because then you got more
Yeah.
weight.
Yeah.
Right. Pulling it down. It's like, ugh.
Yeah.
But I would think about it because the East Coast, you guys have a lot of some marble quarries and some granite quarries and stuff. So maybe that's what's prevented the cement from taking over
I don't know.
out there because your stone quarries are actual stone quarries and people aren't thinking cement. So,
I don't know. Well, and you bring up a great point there because that's what Socrates is known for. Socrates bluestone. So
mhm.
we had a lot of Irish. Um, why am I blanking? It was Irish and it's not Italians.
Yeah.
Sorry, Irish and Italians. And they came in. They worked in the bluestone quarries, and Socrates was famous for their bluestone for
Mm,
decades.
Mm.
Huge shipping. You can still, I mean, the sidewalks in Socrates are still bluestone slate.
oh,
Um,
cool.
and they
Oh,
ship that stuff all over the place. And so, yeah, I'm hopeful that a lot of what they did was based on the one that's really been confusing to us is at St. Mary's. So they have all these taller monuments, and I'm talking 6 foot tall,
Hmm.
they're upright stuff, but it's so bizarre because they have like underneath they have bits of slate that somehow like I don't know what they were trying to do. I could see that they were trying to like level things, but like they've built these things up so the monuments are like a foot off the
And
ground,
they're just wedged
and you
on the
got all this
base.
bluestone wedged in
Very
there, and we're
strange.
just we're not sure how in the world it's ended up that way. But
Yeah.
our challenge now, of course, is going to be getting enough heavy equipment in there to
yeah.
either get lift the
To
monument and
lift them, yeah.
yeah, and then get all that out and then level it and put it back on the ground. But yeah, so
Hmm.
mysteries, right?
So was
Mystery.
that their foundation? Because there was one at Evergreen that was like that, one of the bigger monuments that when they took it down, it was just like pieces of stone, flat stone
Yeah,
Yeah,
as
yeah,
the
it's so
foundation.
bizarre.
yeah.
Yeah, but these are built up, and so it's like how like I
Or has the ground just settled?
ooh wow that'd be a lot of settling.
Yeah, that's
I mean
true.
that's like a foot of settle anyway.
But
But
yeah, I don't know
yeah,
because
so
they're
Hmm.
old. They've been there a while.
these are the mysteries. That's
Yeah.
why, our next purchase after we get the mini excavator will be like a 40-ton crane. And we like the big ones that can reach like halfway across the cemetery and just, lift them up and move them and
Why don't you just get well, I don't know how much room you can get in with a truck. One will, a monument truck that has a lift on the back of the truck.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
so my dream, you can Google these. They're called spider cranes, SPYDER spider cranes. So they literally make this one. You can drive it through a doorway, like a standard doorway. Okay.
Wow.
It comes on these 2 tracks and it will lift up to 6,000, 8,000 pounds. And it's so cool. Like the legs will deploy, right? So it's got four
Like a
legs that
spider.
will deploy. Yeah, it's like a spider. It's amazing.
Not just
And then this little crane that has like this reach, it's like a 30-foot reach, and it can, maneuver. And I'm like, oh, I need one of those. Uh, but they're like 25 grand, for the smallest one. And I'm like, yeah, someday.
So if there's
Maybe.
anybody out there that wants to donate to Gravestone
Right.
Guardians
Exactly.
and
Help us out.
We are
Help us
currently
out. Yeah.
accepting
Yeah.
donations.
Because and I found out about it because there's one preservation guy down in Cape Cod who owns one. And his claim is he's like, I'm the only one in New England who's got one of these. So that's why
That's
I am
bragging rights.
qualified
Uh-huh.
to do your repairs. And I'm like, I want to be the second one.
because then you could say, I now have one too. So I can
Yeah.
totally
That's
do your
right.
repairs.
Like, you want me. And oh, by the way, we won't charge you. We'll take a donation, but we don't have a fee. So I don't know if that's a good business model, but being a nonprofit, we figured that was probably the best way, right?
We're
So
not in it for the money.
yeah.
But you're doing it from the heart too, which is
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
that's what we've said. And most of us who are doing this are not in it to get rich. We're in it because we want to
No.
preserve the history and the stories
Yeah.
and the cemeteries. We're not going to make any money off of this. We're never
No,
going to
you're
get
gonna get
rich off
poor.
of this.
You're gonna get poor.
But
Yeah.
yeah, we're going to spend all our money doing it. But that's okay.
Uh-huh. Yep.
We're leaving legacies behind for hopefully future generations to take over.
We
So
sure
We're
are.
trying.
Yeah. As long as I pay off my bills before I die, my kids won't curse me.
right. They might give you a headstone too then.
Oh,
That's
obelisk. I want an obelisk.
Yeah.
Big one.
There you go. I like it. I'm going for the slate style myself,
Okay.
1600s death's head. That's
Well, yeah,
my dream.
we've got the one gentleman in was it North Carolina that does that, the primitive.
And he makes them.
Yeah.
I know.
he's
Uh,
good too.
I mean,
It's
I've even
amazing.
thought about like, maybe I could learn how. I'm like, no, no, no.
But you know what? If there weren't people like you, that none of this stuff would be getting done. I'm sure Jenny would like to wrap you up and put you in the closet once in a while. But
No, I do enjoy the projects. He does keep adding to the list, which is fine because we do have the time. but he's a bulldozer.
Sure.
You will
Oh,
never be bored.
more.
That's for sure.
I will never be bored.
No,
Never.
I mean, look what you're getting done. These cemeteries sat for decades,
Yeah.
Yeah.
decades.
Yep.
And it just
It's
needed
fun.
someone like you two to come in and actually see what needs to be done and actually do it.
The picture behind Jenny with the finger ground. It's fun to see the before and after on that one.
Oh yeah.
So many were either on the ground or leaning, and
Mhm.
to see so many whiter because most of them have been cleaned and standing upright. I mean, it gives you chills just to
Mhm.
know a year ago what we were looking at,
Yeah.
and through volunteer work, and the same volunteers keep coming, so they caught it, they caught the bug.
They're dedicated.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. And it's
Have you guys been researching the stories too?
not so much on that one.
Well, on these, we really focused on the Revolutionary War,
Yeah.
and the War of 1812, and so I did my best investigative researching. Most of them, thankfully, at least had some sort of a pension record, right?
Oh, good.
Uh, and it's just fascinating. That's one of the things that was absolutely fascinating was that these let's face it, the record keeping for the Revolutionary War was not very good.
Mhm.
Especially for the militia members, right? And so, but what was fascinating was when they passed these acts in Congress, where they were like, "Hey, we're gonna, give these folks that served a pension, but they just have to prove their service, right?"
Right.
And what you love is you open up these records, and you're like, affidavit after affidavit after affidavit, and like John, testified for his buddy, Bill, and Bill, he swore an affidavit for his buddy John, and they all, together, and then you get to start reading these, and they're like, oh yeah, I was at, I went to this place and I went to that place. And several of them in the Finger Ground. They were at the Battle of White Plains with George
Oh,
Washington.
how
Um,
cool is
and
that?
yeah, and they're like, oh yeah,
Oh,
like General Washington, and we evacuated from Harlem, and we went to White Plains, and we engaged, the Continentals there, or the
Oh
regulars.
gosh.
They're doing their thing, and then we had to evacuate, across the river to get away at Haverstraw, and you're reading all this, and I'm like, I grew up here, like I knew all this, but I didn't know all this, right?
Right.
Right, right.
Yeah, and then the War of 1812 guy, he's like, "Oh yeah, I went to Quebec, right? And we blew up the Canadians." I'm like, you did what? Like, yeah, and these guys were just farmers. I mean, that was
Mhm.
occupation. They're just a bunch of farmers, and they're like, And then the other one I absolutely was floored by. One of them was paid for very brief service, but he escorted Tories to the Esopus, which is a little creek that runs into the Hudson River in Kingston, which is just south of Saugerties. And I didn't know this. They actually had a couple sloops at the mouth of the Esopus that were prison ships for the Tories.
Hmm.
And I'm like, we had those? Like, I know that those were, in Brooklyn in the East River, but
Right,
I
but
didn't
not
know
up
we had
there.
them. And I'm like, you guys were actually escorting your own people. Like, insane. That and Indians. So they talk about we were patrolling for Tories and Indians, and I'm like, oh my. So
It's
Again, it brings things to life
yeah.
that you
yes,
just,
yeah.
like you said, you knew the history, you know about the battles, and we've read about them, but when you start putting these actual names to the places and the battles and the people that were involved, I always think it's funny because we have especially in New England, there's all the places that George Washington stayed here or slept here or ate here or whatever.
he
George
had a drink.
Washington
Yeah.
was
He
all
had a
over New
glass of
England.
water. Yeah.
He was everywhere.
But to actually be able to see these men that fought alongside of him or that were commanded by him,
Yeah.
and to know that they were looking up to him to lead them through this whole situation, and they were there on the grounds. It was, to me, that's more important than where he slept.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, it's cool too, but
Yeah.
the fact that they are telling their personal story about what he was telling them to do and how they were going to get through whichever situation they were involved in that moment. And then you were able to go back and read that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, these are the men who fought and won the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
Not that Washington didn't, but these are the stories.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's neat to just, particularly in this one, it's just neat to be connected to all of them and to do the restoration and to know their stories and to just, and the fun part is we'll be done with that work at the Finger Ground this year.
Yeah.
We went through and we inventoried, and we've got about 30 some stones left to work. So we
That's
figure in the
fantastic.
first couple of months, by late summer,
Yeah.
we should be wrapped up with all the major stuff. And then, it's just little things like there's a fence that needs to be replaced on the border of this thing. But I'm like, look, if we don't get the fence this year, we don't get the fence. So it's little things. But yeah, just so cool to see that picture. And it's like, that's history. These are the early settlers in Ulster County and militiamen and just wow.
They need to be
Yeah.
remembered.
Yeah.
And the amount of work that you've done in a year too. I mean, that's,
Wow.
That's
I mean, it's not nearly
commendable.
as big as certain other cemeteries, but that's still to put, like you said, a large majority of those stones in the picture behind me were down or really crooked.
Yeah.
And look at what you've done. And you've cleared out all the weeds and you've done, I mean, that's a lot to do in when you think about it in a year, which is a short amount of time to do the amount of work that you guys have done there.
Yep.
And the fact that it's going to have a rededication is just awesome, which I love.
Yeah.
How many burials are in that cemetery?
186
Okay, well,
or thereabouts. Or
Yeah,
it's not a
thereabouts.
small one. I mean, it's not a small one either.
No, it's not 30. It's, I mean, about 186,
It's a
maybe a
schmedium.
little more because there's probably some unmarked graves, maybe.
It's a schmedium.
It's
It's
a
a schmedium.
schmedium.
But yeah, again, in a year to get it done. And I think it's great that the community got so involved that you get
That's
to do this
cool.
rededication.
Yeah.
And now, at least for another couple of decades, they're not going to be forgotten anymore. People are invested in it. And now, so even when you guys aren't there and you're down in Massachusetts, they're going to be there taking care of them going forward. And, and that's so cool.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that your friend reached out and said, hey, come check this out.
Yeah.
That's literally how all this started with a
Yeah.
conversation, right? Of just, I want to figure out how to do it, but I'm old and I don't know, how to rally the forces. And here we are, right? So.
Well,
And if you had told me it'd take a year, I would have been like, there's no way we can get it. Did not look like it looked like a 5-year project at least. So you never know.
you guys are good at that too, rallying the forces. You're really, really good at that. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. So if folks would like to reach out to you in the area to work with you guys or whatever, what is the best way for them to get in contact with you guys?
Probably just the website. So
Okay.
so it just, I don't even think we're at www dot, are we? We're just Gravestone Guard. Hold on, I'm looking.
Yeah, it is.
I should know this.
Gravestoneguardians.org.
Perfect.
Hold on. I click on it. Yeah, so it's the https / right, gravestoneguardians.org, and you can message us through there, and we get those through Gmail, and we'd love to hear from folks if they need help or if they would like to be guided, whatever the case may be. And on the website it even says that we primarily focus on New England and Eastern New York, but we're always up for a road trip. That depends on where. So
Right.
And we have a Facebook page as well,
yeah, we got a Facebook page,
just to follow along with what we.
and we're trying to branch out. Like we've got Epic Preservation is up in Michigan. He's amazing. He's embraced the social media thing. He's got thousands of followers because he makes all the cool videos and TikTok and all that. And I'm like, we're not there yet.
We're still struggling with taking before pictures.
Oh,
we
gosh.
get done and we're like, did somebody take a before picture? And we're like, oh, because we get so into it. So we're learning.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
We're
social media side of things it's one of those things that you want it because you want people to see what you're doing, but
Right.
it's also a lot more work on that
It's a lot
end.
of work.
Yeah, I'm like,
So-
look, I just want to get the stone straightened. I
Right.
need to stop and take the photos. I'm like, I need a photographer, right? We need
I was
someone.
gonna say you should get a volunteer or something with one
Yeah.
to be your
Yeah.
social media
Yeah.
person.
We thought we had one. She showed up one time. She took a bunch of photos and never came back.
Yeah. That was kind of
We even bought her lunch. I was like, come on, I thought we were being nice.
Well, we will make sure we'll link the website and your Facebook page in our show notes. So folks, if you want to reach out to these guys and do some stuff in the Massachusetts, New York area or anywhere, like they said, let them know. David and Jenny will be happy to chat with you and let you know what they can do to help. And we just want to say thank you. Thank you for the work you did here in Colorado before you left. And thank you for continuing the passion. And I'm so glad that the opportunity came for you to make part of your dreams come true by going to the Massachusetts area. And now
Thank
you don't
you.
have to be so choosy because you have time to go back sort of
That's right.
and
That's
visit
right.
those cemeteries that you were falling in love with. So I
Yeah.
think that's amazing.
We still feel pressured on a random Saturday.
Oh.
He's like, we need to go out.
Yeah,
I'm like,
come
it's
on. Time to
10 degrees
waste it.
outside. I'm not going outside 10 degrees.
You got foot warmers. Come on.
There's a heater in the car, right?
Yeah.
Hey, if
Right.
there's not a
Yeah.
ton of snow on the ground and you can go see the graves, I say
We've
go for
done
it.
Frozen ground, we've done it.
Yeah. Last year, New Year's Day.
Hmm.
Yeah, or New Year's Eve, it
Yeah.
was like 5 degrees. So we did like 20-minute bursts and then we go back
Yeah.
and warm up and then go back and do it again. Because there's so much to be done. So anyway.
I don't want to take it for granted.
Yeah.
We're happy to be here. So
Well, good. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us
Yeah.
for this
thanks for
episode.
having us.
Uh, It was so much fun. And you know what? After you guys did the dedication and stuff, we'd love to maybe see some photos and have you back for that.
Oh yeah, please. That would
Yeah,
be great.
that would be really cool.
Yeah.
That'd be a lot of fun.
Because that's going to be such an awesome event. And with the histories coming up, like I said, the birthday celebrations are coming up. So
They are.
the more we can do in the cemeteries and make people aware will be great. So thank you.
You bet.
You bet.
Thank you for joining us today. To learn more about today's episode, visit our website, theordinaryextraordinarycemetery.com, where you'll find additional links in our show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe to our channel. And if you enjoyed this or any of our episodes, consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Your support helps others find our show and discover all of our ordinary, extraordinary stories.
You can also follow us on social media for cemetery facts, photos, quotes, and more. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery and on X at OrdExtraCem. If you'd like to help support us financially, you can donate a cup of coffee by clicking on the coffee cup icon on our website or YouTube, or purchase some of our fabulous Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery merchandise through our store link.
Until we meet again.